Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the TRAP team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of TRAP.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappists. Welcome back to what many people are calling episode 32 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. My name is Lick Lincoln, and joining me as ever are the 3 other horsemen of the apocalypse. Carl, the voice widger, Alan, the storyteller Smith, and Andy Hart. Before we go on to the high energy review reads and so forth, just to let you know, this show is coming out on the morning of the Humans Under Management conference this Thursday. So some of the people at the conference might have already listened to this on their way into the conference, if that makes sense. So Andy, we know him as a shy bit of a wallflower, doesn't like to self-promote, so he doesn't want to talk about Hum so much this week, but no doubt we'll catch up on it on episode 33. But that's going to be a great event. It's the best conference in the UK, and it's
appreciate you both making the effort, Nick and Alan.
Well, true chums, mate. Don't they?
We're bringing a dozen people there. There's a whole Loser Capital crew will be there.
Fair
So
play, Andy.
it better be good.
For giving out the free tickets to Alan. That's
Just,
the only
I wish he did. He bloody doesn't get free tickets. Full price.
Unfortunately,
It certainly wasn't full price, but yeah, looking forward to the day.
Discount, 5% off. Yes.
unfortunately,
Come on,
I
Mr.
can't make
Hart,
it. But the very, very best of luck, Andy. I know the effort that goes into these things, so fair play for putting it on again. And
Thanks,
I'm
mate.
sure everyone will love it. And good luck to everyone attending.
Thank you,
Apparently,
mate.
Nick Lincoln's not speaking. First
No,
time.
I think I've crossed the Rubicon or something. I think now. I don't get asked.
You got cancelled by your mate
cancelled.
Hart.
I got cancelled. Andy's focusing on his big brands. Okay, high energy reviews, Andrew. Come on, fire us up.
Okay, first up is by DB-85, 5 stars, absolute gold. Absolute gold. As a relatively new advisor, the tips, tricks, discussions in this podcast have given me some great insights into how best to serve my clients. I look forward to every new episode. Thanks, gents. Next up is from Back to Why, Nick at BWM. Bit of an odd handle. Anyway, the givers, 5 stars. Some people in life give back, and these 4 loons certainly do that. Great work, lads. Keep giving back to this amazing community of ours. I learn something new every time I tune in. 6-star review. Final review is from JWAH 1984, 5 stars, enjoyable. I really enjoyed the format, simple and funny, mixing dry humour and some dad jokes, hopefully not talking about me, with some topical financial content. Thank you. Back to you, boss.
Excellent. Thank you for those reviews, Trappists. And as ever, do keep on sending them in. And if you want to reference your name in the reviews, even better, so we know who you are. That just engenders, I think, a sense of community. Okay, so there's a lot of news going on, a lot of stuff happening in this thing of ours, this world that we've chosen to immerse ourselves in. We have quite a few topical tidbits. Mr. Hart, lead off.
Okay, yeah. So this is there was a company that launched called Open Money. And it's an article about sort of the rise and fall of open money. It's one of these sort of no help, robo advisor investment portfolio type companies. First thing I want to say, obviously, hats off. You know, it's very commendable setting up a new business and trying to start something new and do something quite disruptive. But then obviously let's talk about the challenge of scaling a regulated financial advice business. I have written about this in the past, saying that financial advice, regulated financial advice, is a luxury product. It's very hard to do for cheap online and at scale. And again, another company has sort of fallen by the wayside. They've invested about 30 million in Open Money. One of the key sort of original founders, co-founders and investors was a guy called Duncan Cameron, who was the sort of tech guy behind Money Supermarket. I think at one point they were burning 600 grand a month and they were close to 100 employees, and the revenue of the company was about 1 million. So it's one of those, again, unfortunate stories where they weren't able to crack this thing that is called regulated financial advice on mass scale. So again, it's another sort of overly celebrated company that's sort of back down to earth. So yeah, it's that's the open money story. Any comments?
I don't know the story, obviously, other than what was reported in the media. One thing that struck me, though, and referencing it back to our last episode where we talked about starting an advice business, and I think all of us broadly said that you're going to earn nothing for 2 years, for example, or you're going to have it's going to be years of quite tough times. And that is as a kind of micro, all of us effectively 1-man, 2-man sort of micro type businesses. One thing that struck me, you're right, Andy, I don't want to decry anyone who's got the idea to start any new business, but you look at the burn rate this company had, because there was a lot of big salaries being taken out. And I just thought to myself, if you've got a startup business, you should have enough money not to take zero from that business for 2-3 years. You should have enough savings or something. If a startup where the executives are being paid 6-figure salaries, to me is just anathema. I couldn't imagine it, wouldn't do it myself. You're burning other people's money. I may have the wrong end of the stick, but that's just what it seems to be. The message I saw. You're going to struggle if the money going out is multiples of the money coming in. Pretty obvious.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, you're talking of robo-advice businesses trying and failing it again in the UK. A few episodes back, we discussed Vanguard closing down its kind of light advice robo-service in the UK. It's going great guns in the US, but just didn't get any traction here. And Vanguard are also turning their back on China. I don't know if you guys saw this. They've closed down their China office. And obviously Vanguard is a significant brand, a significant investment manager. And they have just decided not to pursue their business in China. I've put a link to the article in which I read this in. They don't say why. The quote here is, Vanguard will close its Shanghai office and will continue to monitor developments in China. I'm guessing it's just a sign of these regimes in the world that are getting more and more autocratic and unpleasant, and China is kind of turning its back on a lot of the developments we thought would happen to it as it sort of embraced capitalism. I think Vanguard's thinking we're getting out of this now, and maybe we'll come back in future. But that's quite a big thing. Obviously, China is a potentially massive market. So I just thought I'd mention that. Woj, the Ideas Exchange in Ireland, how's it going?
Really, really well. So what I've done is I've sent about 10 messages to various principals of financial planning firms, and we are meeting on the 30th of November in a house on Leeson Street in Dublin at 6 p.m. And after that, I don't really know what's going to happen, other than about 10 people have said that they're going to go so far. Have got a few kind of other messages. So kind of what we're trying to do to make it as effective as possible and maybe get it off the ground, because I guess that's going to be the hard part, is to maybe just limit it to principals of firms. And we'll just kind of see where we go to allow us kick around a few ideas and see, is there an appetite to kind of kick something off? And if there is, then we'll decide it that evening. And if not, we'll have a great night anyway. So, looking forward to it. And thanks to everyone who pretty much straight away came back and said, yeah, I'm in. A couple of people obviously can't make it. You're never going to suit everybody. But, so look, if I haven't been in touch, this is an open invite. If you're a principal of a financial planning firm, or you're on the road or the transition to real financial planning, please do come along. 30th of November, house on Leeson Street in Dublin, 6 p.m. See you there.
It's a great effort, Carl. Well done. We wish you the best with that. It's certainly something that we've embraced. Well, the three of us in the UK here, we go to our one, and we get enough out of it, don't we? I think. Okay, right. Talking of world events and despots and things going on, we're not a political show, and we don't want to become a political show, but there are things going on in the world that are pretty shitty at the moment. In the Middle East, obviously, and something that we were talking about, I think, in the Ideas Exchange, actually, this peer group that we belong to, is how are we talking to our clients about this? Because I have a number of Jewish clients, and are we raising these events, and are we discussing it? And some people are sort of having phone calls, I think, phoning their clients, just talking about what's going on in Israel and so forth. And I didn't, because I just didn't. it's really hard, isn't it? I just didn't want to have a conversation about it. But what I did have, fun enough, this month, I had 3 Jewish clients with birthdays, and I write clients' birthday cards. I just put a handwritten little note in. You don't want to be too kind of condescending or sort of sentimental about it, but you want to acknowledge, right? You know what's going on, because a lot of these Jewish clients have family and friends in Israel. They might be planning to go to Israel, when they retire. So I've just been putting these, and I had one guy came back to me and said, "That's really sweet, Nick, you sentimental old fool. Thank you." So I don't know if you guys are doing anything. Have sort of, to use the modern parlance, reached out to people who might be affected by these terrible events.
Yeah. So yeah, look, it's shocking stuff, and let's hope for peaceful resolution very, very soon, and let's trust in humanity to go and find that resolution. I had got a couple of more than a couple. I had a good few conversations with clients who are a little bit kind of worried about stock markets and the fact that their investment isn't returning what the long-term average is and all of that kind of stuff. So we actually have our investment newsletter is due out next week. So we've kind of covered a couple of things. We've various people from Metis doing various articles on that. But what I've done is I actually shared it with you boys. I've done a video to kind of just, I suppose, I don't know if it can give comfort or ease concerns, but just to remind people as to why we're doing what we're doing, why they're invested in what they're invested in. Andy was very kind to update his wall of worry, which I used in the presentation. And I think it's if you haven't seen Andy's wall of worry, I think it's a really good chart to use to just demonstrate to people that, look, this time isn't different. Volatility has always been around. We may have been in a couple of years where volatility seems to be the norm. That's fine. It's you just got to sit in your hands and you just got to ride this out. But that's much, much easier said than done. And we got to understand and appreciate that there are human emotions. And I suppose part of the video, or the end of the video, was for me to say, look, please don't sit and suffer in silence. Do reach out, because we can just have a conversation and chat it through. And as we always know, that talking is good, and you might feel better afterwards. Alan, what have you got to add to this?
The challenge we've got is, in my experience, this isn't really about markets and volatility. That's the issue. We had something written on a similar vein, which we send a monthly newsletter to all our existing clients, and we'd had one written, which is a similar message. Don't worry about it. If you're a Jewish family living in London with close members of your family living in Israel, it reminds me a little bit, entirely different but similar kind of sentiment when COVID hit, and people saying, "Don't worry about the markets. Don't worry about the markets." People are saying, "I don't give a shit about the markets. I give a shit about staying alive and making sure that my parents or grandparents are okay." And I think we've got to be careful in this of saying, "Don't worry, don't worry." And it's like, hey, I wasn't even thinking about it. But my mother lives in Tel Aviv or something like that. And I think that's we're in London. We've got a lot of Jewish clients. And it's an issue. And you're right, Nick, it's tricky because as much as I've tried, I don't really know the full history of a conflict that's effectively been going on for maybe hundreds or even thousands of years in one way or another. All we've done thus far in response to this, because I think it's dangerous to completely ignore it and pretend nothing's happening. For our client newsletter, which went out last week, I just did a cover note, and it was referencing it. It was referencing the terrible events going on in the Middle East. And I said, the only words of comfort I can offer is those famous words, "This too shall pass," and hopefully very soon. And if anyone wants to speak about it, then feel free to have a conversation with us. But that's all. The point that Nick's making is it's tricky and it's difficult, but we shouldn't ignore it. Do you have anything on this, Andy? You'll have similar situations, similar clients to me.
I obviously live in northwest London, so I've got lots of friends, clients, connections that obviously have family that are in Israel and various other things. So I've become very much more aware of it. I haven't led in any way the sort of financial stock market element to it, but yeah, I've become a lot more aware of it. But again, I echo what both of you boys said, Alan and Nick. It's somewhat tricky to navigate, but we're doing all we can in a tough situation. Back to you, boss.
Okay, just close on that. I mean, obviously, our thoughts go out to everybody involved in this, in that mess on both sides. It's not great, and I am finding actually the sideways market. I think is a bigger. We're in a long sideways market, and we have talked about this before. But I find this harder to navigate with clients actually than a precipitous decline, because they're kind of expecting you to be on the clients are expecting us to come to them when that happens. And they know what we're going to say, and we go. But when you have it's not going anywhere. It's kind of been in stasis now for like 3 years. It feels like, and people taking money out of their portfolios. They are going down just gradually. It's like a sort of slow demise. So I'm sure obviously we'll come out of it at some stage, but current world events aren't helping. Our good friend, the huckster, Wodge, sham, bankrupt, fraud.
Sorry. Yes, indeed. What did you call him? Sham?
Bankrupt fraud. Or scam, bankrupt fraud, whatever you want.
So, the FTX trial happened. And in 4 hours, a jury of lay people said this guy is a total fraudster and convicted him on, I think, 19 counts of fraud. It took Silicon Valley how many years? 5 or 6 years to kind of see through this dude. So how he got away with what he was doing for so long is an absolute and utter mystery. It just goes to show that, you got to take with a bucket of salt these large or these star fund managers, star people in various industries. You got to look under the bonnet. And I think Sequoia Capital, who are like the biggest PE firm out there, they got caught really, really badly. And apparently they invested in COVID towards the end. They invested hundreds of millions, and it was over a Zoom call. And apparently the chat within the Sequoia people on that Zoom call was like, oh my God, this guy is amazing. I'm 10 out of 10 in and all this kind of stuff. I read a load of articles over the weekend on this. So just incredible stuff. And look, it's good to have our own biases reconfirmed, I suppose, but always invest in what has always worked. And, the next best thing and the new shiny thing is not necessarily always what it's cracked up to be. So tread carefully. That guy is going to go down for a long time. I think there's going to be a Netflix documentary. It's going to be awesome because there was crazy stuff going on in there. Andy?
I'm pretty mesmerised by the story. I find it fascinating, and the numbers that are involved are mind-blowing. It's not as clear-cut as a straight-up fraud as we think. I think all in all, said and done, maybe nobody's going to lose money. Again,
I think that's right. Currently, it's 80p or 90p in the pound that they've already got through investments.
This guy did something like 300 private equity investments in 2 years. It's staggering, just that alone. And weirdly, nobody will maybe lose money, which is just so. This fraud is unique. It's not like anything else we've seen before. And the guy is incredibly smart and intelligent. Obviously, he was doing the wrong thing. That's another story. But putting this guy behind bars for 100 years is not good for humanity. But that's my point on it. Over to you, Alan.
There's nothing really to add to it. Just think it's just interesting, and just linking this to something else, as you know, we maybe talk about a future thing. But I saw Morgan Housel on, Morgan Housel, he's got a new book out. He was on the Tim Ferriss podcast recently. This is not my culture corner, but the interesting thing was he talked about things that never change, and all the things that do change, things that don't change. And this is just one. There's always going to be frauds. There's always going to be scams and Ponzi schemes, and this is yet another one, and there'll be another one next year or the year after or something, and human beings will be attracted to it. You're right. I heard about the Sequoia Capital guys. So honestly, I've followed them on podcasts and things over the years. Smartest people on the planet, and they're on that famous Zoom call you talked about, Carl. And this dude was playing. Sam Bankman-Fried was playing some video games or something on another screen whilst he's having this pitch call to the people at Sequoia. Now, I would take that as being, God, this guy is rude. He's not paying attention to us. He's pitching us for money. But they talk, how clever this guy is. He's playing video games whilst pitching to us. He must be the smartest guy ever. Let's pile in all our investments to them.
It's another power. It's another power move. Don't give a shit.
Yeah,
And then somebody comes towards you.
Yeah.
You pull away and don't care, and people want you more.
I don't care about your money. If it's not you, someone else will invest in it. So they're all piling in. No, there is an amazing.
It's levels and layers of human misbehavior and human
nature. For the ages.
Yeah.
It's all about human beings. That's all it is. Interesting.
Yeah, there was one comment made that he had only 3 directors in the business, and he couldn't remember the names of 2 of them. And that the prerequisite for being a director of the firm was that you would DocuSign at 3 a.m. in the morning, right?
Yeah, this is the same thing about the investments. All he was doing was DocuSigning the whole freaking time. Anyone who's ever done investments know that DocuSign is the thing with raising money. All he was doing was signing DocuSign 24 hours a day, 300 investments in 2 years.
But where was the regulation? Where was the regulation and where was the due diligence? You know, like, I mean, if we want to appoint a director to Metis Ireland, we have to go through all this big, huge process with the central bank.
You mean Metis Norway?
This guy couldn't even remember the names of 2 directors. Like, I mean, just crazy stuff. And there's stories about his CFO, I think, didn't even have an office. It was a floor in a building that didn't exist. Anyway, crazy stuff.
I can tell you there'll be more to come out in other stories as yet not revealed. This was a story of the ages of the zero interest rate policy, of COVID, of lockdown. Of stimulation money, of just a whole series. It was a perfect storm of craziness. We were living through it at the time, and everyone being
absolute
at home.
Shambles.
Yeah, it was just crazy, and I'm convinced there's other things are yet to be revealed in the crypto world and NFTs and associated kind of businesses. So.
NFTs. There's an hour-long conversation for another day. Anyway,
All right.
Okay, well, let's draw a line. I mean, Andy, I strongly disagree with you. This guy's an odious little shit, and 110 years in jail is not long enough for him. Yeah, right. Okay, Mr. Smith, a white paper from our tall Australian friend.
Look. I read a lot of this stuff that comes out. I mentioned a white paper or a report last time we had this episode, this podcast from Next Wealth. This is something that's come out from Brett Davidson. I believe, just a generic comment, first of all, I believe it's important if you want to be good at your job, if you're a financial planner listening to this, to immerse yourself in what's going on, to read white papers, to read new documents, to read blogs and things which are relevant to the work we do. You should pursue excellence at all times. And one way you pursue excellence is by knowing what's going on. When I got started in business, I was looking to pursue excellence.
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
You love it.
That was a cue. I thought, how do I tee you up? Anyway. But it is true. All those years ago, when I was getting started, I was looking everywhere for lessons. How do I learn about this? And you're right, the tall, irreverent Aussie by the name of Brett Davidson. I think he had recently arrived in the UK when I got started, and I think I was one of his early clients because he ran a workshop program, and I signed up for it, and it was great. And I've been following Brett, and we've done a lot of work with him in our business over the years. And he's been brilliant. He's not a knack because he has advised clients. I mean, it was about 64 years ago, but he has been an advisor in Sydney, Australia, but he's one of the people when Brett writes his blog, which comes out. Every time I read it, I think he's in my brain. He's thinking how I'm thinking, and that's the essence of knowing your audience. And he really does know his audience, and he writes about the issues and challenges and the opportunities that all of us have, and actually. Relating it back to a conversation, Carl, that you were having in our private group in the last week or so, I think his latest paper is really, really relevant because it's all about, I think it's titled How to Solve the Scale Problem. And in fact, he even redefines this. You know, a lot of people, a lot of tech companies particularly talk about scaling up. Everyone uses this word scaling up. And it's right. Most of us don't. I don't like that word. It sounds pretty awful. We're in the people business. We look after families. We take care. We don't scale up. So he's redefined it as how to help more people, which we all like. Why wouldn't you want to help more people? If you've got 50 clients, help 100. If you've got 100 clients, help 1,000, and so on. And I also like the way he has produced this on his website. FP Advance is his website, because you can download the white paper, you can listen to the audio, or it's actually got it in sort of sections literally on the website if you just want to skim read it. So the way he's delivered the content, I think, is excellent. And all I'm saying is, if you're remotely interested in growing your business, you should read this white paper, you should engage with it or listen to it, because it comes out with a lot of sensible ideas. And I think, again, some of the stuff that I've done, because it's very difficult to grow your business if you, the original principal or founder, are going to keep your arms around all the clients. Because at some point, there's just not enough time in the day. And how do you double the number of clients? Because if you are the original person, like all of us are, most of the new opportunities come to you. You know, the other clients and new prospective clients will tend to come to you. And at some point, something has to give, because you can't just keep dealing with these clients. You've got to find ways of ultimately, this white paper is about changing your fundamental business model. And Brett is clearly, from reading it, is clear he understands how remuneration works, how revenues works, how profitability works in businesses. So if you're remotely interested in growing your company, then I strongly recommend not just Brett's this particular paper, but all his stuff. Subscribe to his blog. It's really good, really interesting. It's well worth listening.
I think he runs a course. I think it's called Uncover Your Business or something. I think he does it once a year, takes in sort of a cohort, and I've heard some good things about that. So yeah, he's definitely one of the good people in this space. Are you scaling up, Nick? Helping more people?
No. I'm going to change my strapline. I'm not helping people aggressively. That's my
scaling down.
Scaling down, just winding down. Cognitive decline, which set in 1969. I'm building that into my business, Mr. Smith, as you alluded to earlier. Okay, yeah, Brett, good guy.
Right,
he's almost a stereotypical Aussie, but he's very blunt and direct, which is nice. And he does
exactly what you need.
Yeah. Doesn't fanny about, to quote Shakespeare. Okay, I saw something interesting. In the US, I saw this article about how they're increasing their equivalent of the annual allowance, what you can pay into pensions, which they call 401ks for workplace pensions, and I think they're called IRAs for individual personal pensions. The amounts are tiny compared. Unless I'm misreading, I'll put it again. There's a link to this article. This is from the Wall Street Journal, so it might be behind a paywall. But most workers, this is quoting now, most workers will be able to put up to $23,000 into their 401ks annually, up £500 from 2023. 23, that's their annual allowance. You can also put another 7,000 into a personal pension. So 30,000 is their annual allowance, which just obviously their salaries are generally going to be higher. It's the world's capitalist engine. But those limits just sound incredibly low to me. So just an interesting point, and perhaps we should be grateful for the 60,000 that we've currently got in the UK. I don't know if you guys have got any thoughts about that.
And we should be uber grateful, therefore, in Ireland for no limit at all. You can put whatever you want into your pension fund, as long as you don't.
In terms of across the population, Nick, they're obviously still quite high numbers. I'm sure the average amount that's paid into a pension per year is low thousands in the UK, a couple of thousand at most. So obviously, we work in the wealth space, so No, I
get that, Andy. But I'm thinking, if you're just on a six-figure kind of salary, more than that, say you're earning $500,000, you might as well not bother, because you're never going to be able to accrue enough into your pension funds to even begin to replace your income. I just thought, I thought it was a.
Well, it's similar to the ISA limits. The ISA limits in the UK are 20. I know it's obviously we're talking about pensions and ISAs. You can still build up some wealth, Mr. and Mrs. in ISAs at 20k a year. So there's still some merit in it, I believe.
Move on.
Okay, right. What's the next thing we're looking at? Sorry, my thing's hovering. Andy, FCA crypto.
Slightly annoys me. I don't know if you guys have seen this link. This is the FCA, and they're quietly started to regulate crypto marketing in some way. I don't believe crypto as an asset class. It's really irritating. It boils my blood, actually. If you click on the link, you just read the opening sentence to this sort of stuff. Let me just... Yeah, okay, I'm muted, sorry. Yeah, if you go to the top of this, it says, if you're thinking about buying crypto, you need to know the basics and understand the risks before jumping in. So they're already assuming that you are going to be exchanging your golden coins for this crap. That's already very much annoyed me. And remember, if you decide to, they're calling it invest. They're not calling it speculate, gamble. So already in the opening paragraph, the FCA are inadvertently promoting this crap. This is financial trash in my world. We avoid this. And an end consumer punter would click on this link to learn about crypto from the regulator. And even the opening paragraph, I'm going to read that again, before jumping in. And remember, if you decide to invest, this is not an investment. An investment provides a rising income, which inadvertently then provides a rising capital value through profits of companies or rent from property. This is not an investment. It just boils my blood that our regulator is now causing us more problems, and they're meant to be on our side. Over to you, Nick.
Sorry, I'm going to push back against you again here. And I'm certainly not a fan of crypto, and I think it's a whole world of pain in that. But the FCA here is caught in about, if it doesn't do something, doesn't mention it, it gets damned, and when it does mention it, it's getting damned. So,
but don't mention it in that context, Nick. Before jumping in.
Yeah, I think the point being that words are really important. I agree with you. There needs to be a basic definition of investing. This is absolutely speculating. There's nothing wrong with speculating. People want to speculate.
Yeah, but as long as you know it is framed like that.
You don't have a public body designed here to regulate and protect the public and do all that stuff that the FCA is designed for, and use words like before jumping in.
Before jumping in. It's assuming everyone's going to be jumping in. It's ridiculous.
Well, I bet you've hired some PR branding kind of communication companies. Oh, you're appealing to the youth, appeal to the millennials. That's the language they use. But they've completely they've misjudged the message here.
They're meant to be protecting clients from scams and frauds and financial trash, and all they're doing is promoting it. Anyway, that's my.
Well, I don't know. You can't call it. It's not necessarily. We don't like it, but it's not an out and out fraud.
It's not fraud, Nick, but it's not an investment. It doesn't meet the basic criteria of an investment as Andy's described. I mean, I haven't read the piece, Andy. Crypto generically is, as we discussed in this podcast before, is 99% crap. You can make a case for Bitcoin, but not necessarily as an investment. It doesn't throw off any income.
No.
There's no definition of how it generates. How can you anticipate? Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. I think your point's well made. The language which is used is bad.
Yeah. They do say in this opening paragraph, you should be prepared to lose all the money you have, in quotes, invested. So that's the opening paragraph.
Okay, that's all right, yeah. I think Charlie Munger calls it rat poison squared, so I'm going with Charlie on that.
I agree. I agree with you. But I just, for once, not for once, I think the FCA is in a difficult place with this. If they don't do something, they get down. Okay, that's another political thing, and I'll be careful. I'm not saying this is necessarily a good or bad thing, but the Labour government has proposed to bring in VAT on school fees. Actually, no, I'll contradict myself. I do think it's a bad thing, and I'll tell you why in a second. And I had an annual planning meeting with clients last week who are planning on sending their 3 children through private school, private education, and they were saying that what they might do, what these schools are now doing, these private schools, is saying to people, pay up front now. If your 11-year-old is coming here for 7 years, we'll factor an invoice for you where you pay for those whole 7 years up front, and we avoid this VAT thing. So it's just an interesting wrinkle on the unintended consequences of potential political and budgetary changes. Also, this client was saying he's got quite a bit of money in his business. He's saying, I might just pay myself a one-off dividend because I'm sure Labour are going to get rid of entrepreneurs' relief. And it's kind of, well, they might, but they might not. And we can't really make financial decisions on the hoof on what might happen and what might not happen. But certainly for school fees, I think if you've got clients who are putting kids through private school or thinking about it, this conversation is going to come up. Why I think it's a bad idea, by the way, I'll close on this, because the lovely Penelope is a governor at Merchant Taylor's School, which is a fantastic private school around the corner from me in Moore Park. And a lot of the children there are English of Indian descent, and they are the grandchildren of those African Indians who came to the UK in the late 60s and early 70s, fleeing persecution by black leaders such as Idi Amin. They came here, they went through loads of crap, they put up with a lot of rubbish, but they salted away, and they put their kids through university, and now their grandkids are now going to these public schools. If this VAT thing comes in, it'll be really, really hard. Those are the people that are going to get affected by it. And the kids that get into private school because their dads are old boys and they've given money to these schools and it's all nod and a wink, they won't be touched by it. So this politics of envy thing is really going to hit the absolute aspirational class that we want to be encouraging in this country. So I think it's a real shame if that happens. Alan, you were waving your digit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, as somebody who would be impacted by this, I've got 2 kids at private school at the moment, increasing their fees by 20%. What there are is at the schools, and I go to the various events and the sports days and stuff, and you meet a lot of the other parents. And there's certainly a number of them who are aspirational, who are just about affording doing everything that they can, because you're right, particularly ones who've come from a sort of immigrant history. And their parents and their grandparents have told them it's all about education. It's all about education. And these people, where the mum and dad are both working and have no doubt they are compromising a lot of their other parts of their life to make sure their kids get the very best education that they can just about afford. And that's a big slap in the face to those people. And there's a lot of other parents who are there who are just international. Obviously, I'm in London. There's a lot of international parents, and the school fees are effectively paid by the corporate, the big company. If they're working for an American bank or something like that, and so they're in the UK and London for 3 years. So that won't make any impact to them whatsoever. So I think they're going after the wrong people. They're going after often very aspirational people. And I don't care how much money you earn. If you're earning a lot of money, you're already paying a huge amount of tax and personal tax and probably capital gains tax, VAT, etc. It just feels very unfair to go after education, which is the building block of any sort of modern civilized society, is to educate the next generation of children. And obviously it takes the pressure off the state system as well by not having all these kids going to public schools. So I think it's very it's misjudged. Obviously, we're speculating on what may or may not happen, but it certainly seems to be part of their agenda. One last thing I'll throw in here. I'm not a particular fan of the current government, but I did see our Prime Minister interview Elon Musk at the AI conference in London recently. And he was very impressive. Rishi was very impressive. He had a conversation with Elon Musk that I don't think any other political leader in the world could have, in terms of his level of intelligence, his intellect, his ability to discuss some very complex issues. I thought was fabulous. I think, and Rishi went up a degree or two in my estimation through that.
I watched that, Alan. It's essential viewing, right? Yeah. It's a really, really fantastic interview. I think it's 50 or 55 minutes.
Yeah.
However, to say that no other leader in the world could have conducted the interview like he did, I think that's a stretch too far.
Name one off the top of your head now.
I would say Leo Varadkar from Ireland could definitely have conducted the same interview. Okay. I think
I don't know him. I'm thinking Joe Biden. I'm thinking of other Trump in days gone past. Maybe the Irish
in America.
I'm thinking in Europe. I'm thinking. I don't know if the French, what you call them, could do it. But anyway, I just thought he was impressive. And the last thing it relates to your issue on tax, Nick. Someone asked a question, and Elon specifically raised it about entrepreneurs and business owners. And he said, it was brilliant. He just said, so the model is you put all your life savings in 3 to 5 years of really hard work into a new business venture. And there's a 90% possibility that you'll fail and lose everything, which is the whole kind of entrepreneur founder challenge. And Elon himself is making a point. You've got to reward success. In other words, so don't go after entrepreneurs relief. If you've actually managed to be one of the very few who start a business and grow it, put all your life savings and you hire people and you pay your taxes, if you manage to sell it at some stage, don't take away this small benefit that exists in the UK in terms of entrepreneurs relief on capital gains tax. So it was a great interview. And as you say, it's essential listening.
Yeah. And also talking about the US and regulation, just to throw this in on Andy's point about the FCA regulating crypto, you see that the All-In pod, they're livid about this US legislation where they're going to try and regulate AI, and it's just like, wow, if that would be the death of AI.
But that was kind of a lot of that. That's why Musk was in London, wasn't it, to kind of set some regulation rules around AI so that AI remains a good thing as opposed to having the bad actors coming into AI. I think there's a lot of relevance to that. I think that's a real thing, because if AI takes the legs that Elon Musk thinks it's going to do, by Christ, we do need to regulate it. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
I'm fundamentally just the US legislation as it's being muted is that the US government decides what's bad and what's good and what's good, and so now you've suddenly politicized this whole thing, and you're going to I think they did it with Twitter before Elon Musk was there. The Democrat Party in particular were working in cahoots with Jack Dorsey, and it's all out. And this is not me speculating. This has been proven by the Twitter files, and they'll stick to any level. Don't.
That is a case, and I suppose Musk is trying to fix that. And I know there's pros and cons of Elon Musk for sure, but I think listen to that or watch that interview with Rishi Sunak and Elon Musk. I think this is going to go to places none of us can actually imagine. It's just absolutely incredible what's going to happen in our lifetime. This isn't like going to happen in 100 years. This is going to happen over the next few years, and the potential for this to go wrong is quite large. And I suppose the scale of evil that could be out there is a little bit scary. They did sign, I think, an agreement, and China signed the agreement, and the UK signed the agreement, and I think the US signed the agreement, but I'm not entirely sure. So just to try and set some framework around it. And I think if it's not just the US deciding, Nick, if it's kind of the governments globally, I think that's probably a good thing. Anyway, time will tell, I guess, isn't it?
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Right. Yes. Sticking with you, Wodge, I think yesterday you put under our noses an article about the St James's Place advisor who couldn't pay back his business loan.
Yeah, I got Sunday Times yesterday, and this wasn't in the Irish version of the Sunday Times. So, and I did something I shouldn't have been doing. I was looking at LinkedIn on a Sunday, and I'm connected with a lot of, probably through this podcast, with a lot of UK advisors and people in the financial services industry in the UK, and 3 or 4 times people I'm connected with had put up this article from the Sunday Times yesterday where an SJP advisor basically went to the Sunday Times and said, "Oh, look at this. This is a disgrace. SJP loaned me some money to buy a book of business, and I basically couldn't pay it back. And then they put a load of pressure on me to pay the money back because I owed it to them." And all of the comments on LinkedIn I saw were all basically going, terrible SJP, the big bully boys or whatever, right? And maybe it's because SJP aren't in Ireland that I can actually take a step back.
The power of the dark side.
Yeah, but that's actually the point, right? I don't believe they are the dark side. I think they're a fantastic business, like every other business in financial services, and I suppose every industry. They have their good points and they have their bad points, right? But an advisor running to the newspaper because he couldn't pay back money under a model that's very, very well known. I know what the model is. You boys know what the model is about. You buy another advisor who's retiring and they give you the money. And he basically, one of the points he was making was, and then interest rates went up. And I'm like, for Christ's sake, man, if you didn't do the maths to kind of, factor in, well, if interest rates were rising or if they went up, then, am I going to be able to afford it? And I just thought the commentary from the IFA market in the UK, basically supporting this advisor and slating the SJP, was all wrong. I thought, this isn't balanced at all. This guy needs to take an awful lot of responsibility for what went wrong and why you run into the newspaper because they looked for the money back that they gave you and you signed up to the terms and conditions.
Yeah, it's like
sorry if that pisses a lot of people off, but come on, like we are
businessman botches business plan. Yeah,
correct.
That's what it was.
A couple of points. It was slightly different on Twitter. Twitter was a bit more sort of supporting SJP as such. Failed. But I mean, it's peak journalism, isn't it? It's peak mainstream media. Ali Hussein loves these stories. I mean, it wasn't balanced. I mean, how many tens, hundreds, thousands of successful loans have been set up like this? They didn't cover any of that. When I set up a business, a mortgage broker at 24, when I was wearing my polyester suit, I had to borrow £40,000 from a bank and sign a personal guarantee and then get my arse out there and try and pay it back. It's called business. I wasn't moaning saying, how am I going to pay this back? What have I got to do? We know the model that also Transact and Virtus use. It's very successful. Again, it's just peak journalism. They love to find some ridiculous angles.
But look, I accept the peak journalism bit, Andy, and you're right about that. And they got to sell newspapers, right? So headlines and all that kind of stuff, and make the small guy look like he's been bullied. It was more the commentary from the IFAs basically saying, "Oh, this is terrible out of SJP," was the bit that surprised me. I'll be honest.
It's still an immense trigger for a lot of people.
It's a huge trigger. Look, we know when we did the famous SJP episode that we got a bit of flack from the independent sector because we were kind of apologists for this brand, this company. But I stand by everything that we said on that. We didn't. We criticised where criticism was appropriate, and we praised where praise was appropriate. It's not black and white. There's you could, if you focused this amount of attention on any advice business, my business, even Metis Norway, you'd find a few negative points. It's true about it, but you're right. Ali Hussein in particular, and the Sunday Times specifically, it's like every week, and it has been for years. Whilst we're saying this, can I just do a quick side mention, because we're talking about Andy, you taking when you were wearing a cheap polyester suit and smelling of desperation, as Nick described you in your first meeting with Nick. Just a correction of the episode last week, or I think it's a correction, because I think we mentioned when we were starting up in business and anyone starting their own new independent advice business, you mentioned, Andy, you're going to need about 80 grand, 80 or 90,000, I think you said.
No, I said 70,000.
70,000. Well, somebody contacted me recently, somebody who's thinking of doing exactly this. Don't know why they didn't contact you. Maybe I do know. And they said, is that right? And I said, actually, because I didn't really pay attention when you mentioned it. I thought, not at all. That's not right. So you need 20 grand. I think if you're going to go directly authorized, you need about 20 for a capital adequacy, and the rest. I think you could set up an IFA business for under 10,000. You tell me where all your costs and overheads, regulatory costs and stuff, but you don't need 70,000. Do you?
That's basically what it cost me all in, with loss of wages, putting the 20 grand in the bank, getting a slightly different office. It depends on what your starting point is. If you already run a successful business in a different network or something going on and you want to go directly authorised, the actual FCA cost and a consultant to help you out fill in the form or something like that will not cost you much. And there's other people that set up a business cost them £250,000. So I'm just telling you my story. That's why I said 70k. But if you've already got a bit of money in the bank, a bit of traction, a bit of clients, and obviously just switching to become directly authorised, I think you could probably do it for, you're right, Alan, under 10 grand. Yeah.
Okay. Let's not get too much in the weeds on that. Thank you, gents.
Yeah.
Okay, next topical tidbit, Mr. Smith, the Wealthfront debacle.
God, these topical tidbits are going on a bit today. But there's something else that I saw recently. And here's another example of things which will never change. So Wealthfront are effectively a so-called robo-advice firm based in the US, which set up a number of years ago to great fanfare, and I believe were pretty successful. They've got a lot of assets on their platform now, but they are that classic early-stage robo-advice company. And I picked this up on Twitter. There's a guy who writes a lot about this stuff. Andrew Beer, his name is, on Twitter. And he posted this thing which had passed me by otherwise. So Wealthfront themselves, as these companies tend to do from time to time, not satisfied with just having a platform and offering simple low-cost index funds, which is the whole premise of many of these robo firms, they decided to build their own fund, and effectively a sort of quasi-hedge fund. They called it the Risk Parity Fund. This guy's written a really interesting thread about it. I could post a link to that on the show notes. Risk Parity Fund, and it's just all these complicated things that you kind of don't need and don't want. We've got, they've got derivatives in it. They've got a whole series of complex. Sorry, Nick.
And weren't they shoehorning clients into this without transitioning them from?
There were kind of
no discussion.
There's something untoward going on. I don't know if they could have actually been doing this, or I hope they haven't. But they'd actually moved some clients who had the kind of Vanguard 60-40 type portfolio. It seems they'd actually moved them into this fund without necessarily knowing about it. I don't know if they had you had to opt out of having your money moved into it or not. I'm not sure exactly how, but certainly More than $1 billion of assets went into this kind of strange fund called the Wealthfront Risk Parity Fund.
Alan, were they charging more? Was that the reason? Were they charging more? They were trying to become profitable as such? What was the reason behind it?
I think they were charging. I mean, interestingly, this guy mentions it as well on the Twitter thread. They were charging 0.5%, which for a kind of hedge fund type fund is very good. But what they haven't done, there's no doubt you've got to pay for derivatives. There's some sort of leverage in it as well. It's a usual mess of complexity. And he's saying, hang on a minute, you're just saying the fees are 0.5%. There's no way. And he's a hedge fund guy, the guy that does this thread. Where's all the other fees? Because there's definitely fees in there if it's purports to do what you say it does. So I don't know what they were charging for a typical index fund. Maybe it's similar, but they were definitely looking to create some profitability, some extra profit in it. Fast forward to today, the fund's down 20% over the period. If you had been in a sort of Vanguard 60-40, you'd be up 34%. So there's an effective loss of 50% of capital, over 50%. There's $1 billion going into it, has gone into it thus far. And he said, how to incinerate $500 million of retail investors' money. Boom, there you go. This is how it's been done. And even more incredibly, this money's still going into it, still over $1 billion. The people are still putting money into this crazy fund. So in summary, some things change, some things never change. Companies will still create products and services to try to generate extra profits. I thought Wealthfront were one of the, the cleanest, purest. They've been, I've heard, I think they advertise on the Tim Ferriss podcast. They're supposed to be some of the good guys, and yet they've come up with this nonsense fund. They've attracted $1 billion. They've incinerated $500 million of investors' money. It's not good. But these things will always happen. If it's not Wealthfront, someone else will do it next year. I think it's just an interesting story.
Yeah. Plus la mem shows, as they say. Okay, right. Talking about our elected betters and whether it's Labour or Conservative, they're pretty mediocre bunch. I saw this question posted by a Labour MP, Justin Modders, the MP for Ellesmere Port and Neston. He posed this to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. His question was, how many and what proportion of people claiming pension credit were born on or after April 2016? And Laura Trott, Conservative for Sevenoaks, replied, pension credit is only available to those of state pension age. Therefore, the number and proportion of people claiming pension credit who were born on or after April 2016 is 0. They are at most 7 years old. So I hope she delivered that with some pith and verve in her answer. The ignorance of those that would take everything from our wallets if they got the chance is staggering.
That's obviously a spelling mistake. It's obviously an error from him, isn't it? That's just he didn't mean 2016.
It's a typed question. It's a typed question, and he's got a team around. Well, okay, he's got a team around him as well. Yeah. Okay, we've done Hum London. Andy, Google interview warm up tool.
Yeah, Google have launched this tool. I don't know how recently they launched it. It's called the Google Interview Warm Up Tool. You click it; it's a website. So if anyone listening to this is going to be going through the interview process, or they've got kids, grandkids that are going to be doing it, check it out, and then you basically say what type of industry profession you're in, and then they ask you these questions, and you answer them back, and then it sort of grades your answer and stuff. It's quite cool. So yeah, check it out. Nothing more really to say on that. So Google Interview Warm Up Tool. Yeah,
interesting. I just opened that up. That's a neat. Okay, right. We are 53 minutes in, and we've just done the topical tidbits. I think we better quickly move on to what some people laughingly call the meat and potatoes of the show. And we were having some chats before we started recording this about whether this was going to be something worthy of discussion. I think it is, and we can probably build it out into other areas. We don't need to go on about it forever. The final exit strategy. So the last episode I was in Spain. If you watched, you've just seen I was in Spain, and I mentioned it in the audio as well, because my dad, who's 84, managed to fall over and break his leg quite badly. Just stumbled. Wasn't doing anything particularly arduous. But 84 years old, he's got 3 months of rehab, and he's already going stir crazy, bless him. And it just made me think, because my mum and dad of that generation, again, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, it's just what it is, that dad does all the finance. He runs the house, in terms of the finances, all the gadgets, all the Wi-Fi, all how the boiler works, how the irrigation system works on their place in Spain, and mum doesn't have a clue about this kind of stuff. Even logging into the bank, is what was an effort for her. So, and my dad, he's got everything, and I call him Chairman Mao because he's got everything written in a little red book. All the passwords, all the Wi-Fi, everything is in there, and nothing is available for Mum. And it just got me thinking that obviously we're business owners, we're human beings, we've got stuff going on in our lives. If we passed away, would our other halves know what to do? So I put together what I call a life file for Penny and my Luke, and in there I've just dumped everything. It's 3 sections. It's a money section, it's a house section. How does the house run? Where are the brochures, the manuals for all the devices in the house? And there's a third section as well, which escapes me from the moment. Now it's just a Google Doc. I'm evolving all the time. So if I'm not around, Penny and my son and her Luke can work through it and just have a bit of a clue. The third section is the fact that I'm a business owner. So there's a bit in there that I've said, listen, share this with my locum. This is just, I'm a locum for people. I would want this kind of document because I don't, you want to have a clue what the hell is going on. If Nick Lincoln's not here, how was he doing stuff for good or bad? So and you don't want to do it, do you? Because you're thinking, well, this is kind of admitting your own mortality. In a way, you're admitting to yourself you are going to die. But I think we have a responsibility to those we love, just to put something down in a format that is sustainable, will be around, they can easily access. I password protected it. That's a pain with Google Docs. You can't actually password protect, but I've put it into a Dropbox folder, which is password protected. So yeah, and then I just wonder, do we talk? Have you guys done this? Because if you would suddenly be incapacitated, not necessarily dead, but incapacitated, or you pass away, would your loved ones know where the hell to start with your estate? Yeah, there's the will, but the wills don't cover the nitty gritty stuff, the actual practicalities of living your. We all have a digital life, and then do you talk about it with your? I'm certainly going to talk about it with my clients more and say, just I know you've made wills because I check every year with you and they're current and valid. But if Mr. Smith goes, Mrs. Smith, would you have a clue? And vice versa. And I wouldn't lead as that unless I maybe ask change the genders around there and say, Mr. Smith, if Mrs. Smith goes, would you have a clue? Have you documented it? So I'm just wondering how you guys do and how you've addressed this, if you've addressed it at all in your lives initially, and then do you raise it with clients?
I'll throw in a couple of things. I'd love to be a fly on the wall hearing you and your dad have conversations about stuff and how much you sort of respect Chairman Mao, but that's a separate point. I'd pay good money to see that. It is quite a deep subject. Do we talk about it with our clients? What have we done ourselves? Everyone's got their own situation. You're right. Digitally, it's a complete mess. The fact that you've told, Luke, your son, where the thermostat manual is, again, I don't know how useful that's going to be post your demise. Yes, there are quite a few moving parts to this. It's a bit like the Italians, isn't it? They don't wear seatbelts because it's like preparing for a crash. And I'm like, yeah, okay. The law says you need to wear a seatbelt. The digital lives are a whole other mess, like passwords for social media, passwords for email, what do you want to share, not, two-step authentication, banks. As a successful divorcee, I don't have a spouse that I can share this file with, and my kids are 3.5 at the moment, so they're not on the list. So, my brother knows pretty much everything that's going on with my situation. So, yeah, that's my starter.
What's a successful divorcee? What's that supposed to mean?
Let's move on from that, Nick. Over to another successful divorcee.
On one side it lands failed marriage, the other side it lands successful divorcee. Okay.
Over to Carl.
Jesus, I thought all the talk about the UK politics was bad. This is really bad. Anyway, I've never kept a manual from a thermostat or a cooker or anything like that, Nick. I am absolutely the worst in the world. So I'm not sure.
I am very OCD, Carl. I get that, but I store them as PDFs in Evernote. Now the chances are people aren't going to need any of that stuff, but he's just saying if you need that stuff, it's in this file here. You just click on this link and it is all there. All the bloody receipts and manuals for my sad life on this crazy.
Well, anyway, my kids would totally understand and appreciate that I wouldn't have kept them, and they'd have to figure that stuff out themselves. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't done anything like that. My personal scenario is still not sorted, so I'll be a little bit a while before I kind of get all of that stuff done. What I will say is two points on this. When we started out doing real financial planning, we used to give our clients what we called was a blue box. It was like a little box with like various little slats for various files. I know that an awful lot of clients still have their blue box and they have everything in their blue box. And in the as we kind of transform to the digital era, had a coffee with a friend of mine yesterday, and he asked me exactly about this point. He said, what's going to happen if something happened to me when at least two of my accounts are only accessed via my thumbprint? And I was like, that's actually a really good point. You should probably write all of this down in a document. I'll put you in touch with Nick Lincoln. He's the master at it. But yeah, so look, it's an area of, I suppose, when we do financial plans for our clients, we would always, especially when there's couples there, we would say, look, if anything was to happen, your first port of call is us because we know exactly where everything is. We're never going to have the manual for the washing machine, but in terms of your finances, your wills, all of that kind of stuff, I think, we are, that's part of the service. We are your partner here. We're your partner in good times and in bad times, and we'll help people get through. And we have successfully done that. And, that's part of the, if you get very close to your client, what their goals, dreams, and aspirations are. So it's not just about the finances, and therefore you're in the best possible place to help people through difficult periods like that.
Okay, I know, Alan, you've done this, haven't you? You've written out, if Alan Smith is not around, where the party's to be held, and secondly, where what your lovely wife would do, and what did she say when you mentioned this to her recently?
She said, "Oh yeah, you did. I've no idea where it is though." Yeah. So that's the other thing as well is, I did, years ago, created, and it was a document. It's actually a Word doc, which is less shareable really than Google Doc. But anyway, did this and kind of brain dumped everything I had. It didn't have the thermostat or the cooker. They really had to work that out. But I had all the kind of financial stuff, bank account details. I mean, I've just got a few kind of legacy things that aren't, they're just not necessarily known, just investments and small accounts here and there. So I just want to have a list of things that she knew about, but is the other challenge. And that just needs to be, because you can do all this and create in whatever format, be it digital, hard copy. But the person to whom it's designed for needs to be careful to save it, to store it. Now you can print it off, but the point being, if you print it off, it will change. So many things have changed over the last, since I did it 3-4 years ago. So it's hard to keep it. Maybe you should just do it. Everyone. So I'm speaking first of all as just us or me as a business owner with not overly complex affairs, but certainly there's quite a number of moving parts in it. So there needs to be a method of doing it. And whether it's just an annual, internal family meeting, and you say, well, I'll print it off again and keep it here in this bloody drawer. Make sure you don't forget where it is. That's an important thing. But I think broadening it out to a service to clients, I think it's really important to, I think this kind of, additional service we provide as the trusted advisor to the family's inner circle. I think this goes hand in hand with this stuff. I was speaking to a potentially new client the other day, and he said, look, I think I'm reasonably competent at doing some of this stuff myself. But as I get older, this guy saying to me, he said, I think it's important that we have somebody in our family that should I not be around anymore. And without being sexist about it, it is usually the man or the male who takes control of the family finances. And he said to me, that my wife doesn't really know much about this stuff, and I want to get involved. But if I'm no longer around, I'd like to ensure there's somebody that I know and trust and respect who could step into that role and could take care of things. I remember speaking to a lady client several years ago whose husband just died. And I knew the husband pretty well. And I went to see her at her home. And she said exactly that, Nick. She said, I don't even know how the Sky TV works. Bill took care of all that stuff, took care of everything. And this is somebody, now often you'd have members of the family, the son, or the grandson or something, step in and take care of this stuff. This is a lady who had 2 daughters, one of whom lived in Australia and one lived somewhere, miles away. And it wasn't quite so helpful. That some just other kind of life stuff. So I think it can be a value-added service if we purport to be trusted advisors. And a lot of this, the kind of the financial stuff can be, relatively straightforward. You need to invest in this particular way. You need to have a plan. You need to, stick with the plan, as Carl always says. But what about the other stuff when life becomes challenging or different? I think there's definitely value in creating. I've called it an ice pack in case of emergency, break glass, or in case of emergency, open the folder. Here's all the information. Here's the stuff. This is what you need to do. And if there's something else that we can help you with, give us a call. Andy.
Yeah, a couple of points. I think a good friend of a couple of us on the show, Kev Deemer, I think he coined the acronym ICE in case of emergency. It's the first time I heard it. And I know he does quite a lot of good work with his clients in relation to that. I've personally had 3 clients pass away, die. All 3 were male. All 3 were the dominant one in terms of the finances and the knowledge. But I knew all 3 of the survivors. And one of the benefits of working with a proper financial advisor that looks after families and couples, not individuals and pots of money, is you are there for the survivor. I mean, if you take that to new clients in their 40s, it just sounds a bit, okay, that's probably not really going to be something that we're going to use. But certainly when they're in their 60s and 70s, being there for the survivor is something important. So early on, I obviously want to meet the couple. And even if there's one who's less financially dominant, I certainly want to meet them in the early onboarding stages. I then say if they want to sort of dip out of a couple of meetings here, there and everywhere, it's not the end of the world. But at least they know me. And if anything happens, I'm available for them. So it's got quite a few moving parts. Yeah, what do we do personally is sort of a conversation itself. And then how much do we lead with this with our clients is another conversation. I know some advisors and firms have put together decent sort of PDFs in relation to this, but I haven't seen any for a while. But I know there's some sort of templates out there. So yeah, who's next?
Can I just come? I'll just come back briefly on a associated point. When I was speaking to prospective new clients, and I was describing what our sort of process is. What's the next stage of the? We have initial what we call a coffee meeting, which can just be a telephone call, initial chat. And I said, well, the next stage is we'd like to invite you and your wife into our office to do. It doesn't have to be our office, but we'd like to invite you and your wife because that's the way we do things. We meet as a couple because we consider ourselves to be advisors to the family and not just to you. And this guy straight away said, fantastic. He said, I've spoken to another couple of firms that didn't mention that at all. That to me is really, really important. Now, for us, it's basic, it's hygiene factor. But a lot of other firms don't do that. They say, well, it's the man who's called me up. He's the one that sort of knows about the money and the family finances. We only need to speak to him. And we say, no, it's quite different. And sometimes it can be a bit difficult to people juggling calendars and diaries and finding the time. I say, well, wait until we can all get together in a room because we are here to advise your family and not just you. And I'm sure your spouse, your other half, will have a lot of views on how she sees the future working out for you as a couple and your family, what your values are and what's important to you. And it was just a reminder to me, this stuff is important. And anyone listening to this, always do your best to encourage. If there is a couple, if there's 2 people together, meet them both. It's really important.
Andy, your hand was raised, and now we're waiting for you to say something.
Yeah, I'm almost certain that is still the minority of financial advisors. They are delighted to look after a random pot of money. They're delighted to look after a random individual. But yeah, front foot. No, we only look after couples. We only look after families. That's how we work here. Take it or leave it, basically. Nick.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up. It's not perhaps the most interesting, so it's just front of my mind. It was, I would want this from, if I didn't know how the house was run, I would want something like this if my partner died and she did it all, if Penny passed away. I would want this, and I wouldn't want to leave
going on about the bloody washing machine, Nick.
It's it's a time of terrible loss, and then all of a sudden the person who did all that also
just how to organise the party. Just where'd you get the booze from?
Just do it. And I think clients will really value it.
But we just can't work the thermostat. If there was only a link to a manual.
On a Google Doc folder, which is in a Dropbox folder, which is password controlled that no one's got access to.
Well, I just want to know
on his Evernote account.
You're yours off and leaving it around the house, and your wife doesn't even know where it is. Next time I come around your gap, I'm going to find this document and log into all your bloody accounts.
Who's getting your 10% share in Trap, by the way?
I've got 10% now. I thought I was 5.
You mean it's 7.5? It's 7.5.
One thing that I did, just as I put this document together, and I said to Penny, this by the Coventry Building Society, our mortgages with them, this is the password, blah, 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 blah. And then when you log in, they'll call my phone with a code. And she's going, yeah, but I can't access your phone. So this whole two-factor authentication stuff it's just a mess. It's
mess.
Great.
You just forget about it. You'll be dead.
I know. I do think that, but I don't know. I think you've got responsibilities those you leave behind to at least just make it a little less arduous. And that's why.
Listen, if anyone is listening to this, who's got, as you say, Andy, there are a few. I've got a few drafts kicking around. Never quite nailed the final thing to share with clients. If anyone's listening to this, have got one, share it. Share it online on Twitter or LinkedIn profile or something. Or
email one of us. Email or contact one of us if you think you've got a decent template, and maybe we can do that as a giveaway at a future show or something if our chairman allows.
Yeah, this is his subject.
I'll ponder it. Okay, listen.
Good.
70 minutes into the show, so I think we should probably move on to the Trappist questions, if only for the reason that there she is at the front door with the bulging sack of Trappist questions, as ever, on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, the pinned tweet. There's a link there. You click on that, you submit your question, and then months and months later, we may get around to answering it as we go through them. And I think we'll just do one question today, if that's okay, guys, just from a time point of view. Kind of makes sense, I think, to do that. And let's have a look and see who this first Trappist question is from. This is from chap Richard Polson, who he's on Twitter as Gregor Polson93. He's also on LinkedIn. Chaps, love your podcast, smashing content and stupendous banter. Have been advising for just under 2 years. I'm really trying to embrace the goals-based financial planning that you guys speak of. And I'm trying to steal and emulate as many ideas as possible. Yeah, you crack on and do that, Richard. Looking back at your career, though, what was the moment where you feel that it all clicked in for you, guys? And what book has most inspired you in your line of work? Keep up the good work. Love the podcast. Richard Polson from DeMello and Company Wealth Management. So when was the moment? When was that eureka moment for us? And what was the book that inspired you first? Andy?
I know his boss, Chris. He's a super fan of Trap. So hello. I don't think there was any one thing. I think Alan alluded to it earlier, constantly seeking excellence. You're constantly trying to learn things all the time. The one book I'd say had a biggest sort of kick for me was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It just basically gave me permission to, deliver and do things and don't fight the resistance that's constantly in your brain about delivering and becoming. So, nothing specific. Obviously, we mentioned a couple of things previously, like dimensional, life planning, voyant. But again, there's so many moving parts to it. I couldn't identify anything individually. Anyone else?
Yeah. When I saw the question, given it some thought, and I'd agree with you. There is no one single light bulb moment. There's a series of light bulb moments. And I'll summarize three of them because they apply across three different aspects of what I consider to be core financial planning. One was, and we have talked about him and our experiences on this podcast before, was when I went and saw Paul Armson. When I saw him talk about effectively cash flow modeling, it was a new and unheard of thing. The tools we use nowadays don't matter. The concept is vital and it's important. And I saw Paul, and I know that Nick might have been on the same tour. He did a sort of UK tour. I know Nick saw him at Watford. I saw him in London, and it was just bang, light bulb. I get this now. There's context. That was really, really important to me. And then further down the line, I started thinking about the investment process. Once you built the plan, you need to fuel the plan with something. And I wasn't really satisfied with what we were doing at the time, but I wasn't convinced. I didn't know really what the next stage was. And I met with a guy called Tim Hale, who runs a company, still does run a company called Albion Strategic Consulting. And if you don't know them, you should check them out, check their website. And Tim provides effectively investment counsel to independent advice businesses and helps you build your models from scratch, your investment philosophy. And so I spent a lot of time, me and my team, with Tim. That was another series of light bulb moments when I began to understand how capital markets truly work and that we're wasting our time if we're trying to find the new star fund manager. And that was an important point. And I'm surprised you didn't mention this, Andy, but the last part, when I begin to understand, once I've got the planning, once I've got how to fuel the plan, I had to realize the importance of behavioral investment counseling. And of course, it was finding a gentleman called Nick Murray, his newsletter. And if you want a book Well, in fact, you could. It's hard to choose one. Choose around the year because if you want, because that's got all the sort of snippets from Nick Murray. But start reading. We talked about this many times in the past. But those are the things to me. It was understanding planning, understanding investment, and understanding the importance of behavioral investment counseling. That was a multiple series of light bulb moments that happened to me over probably the course of 5-6 years. And actually, there's not much more to learn after that. There's more you can rinse and repeat and keep understanding and refining it. But there are no huge differences. It's not going to be, crypto's not the new better one, or there's not a new better way to do planning. There might be new technology, but the actual concept doesn't change. I know you want to come back on this, Andy.
Yeah, I'm calling it the 3 Ps. It's the plan first that's paramount. The portfolio funds the plan, and then it's the path. We've got to ensure that they stick to the path. So
Andy, you almost got it right. We've been using this in our company for years. Plan, portfolio, partnership. That's the key. We've been using this in our business. You call it path. I'll laugh at you. We'll call it partnership, which is the truly important thing. Sad. And it's trademarked, so don't try to steal it.
Sad.
Let me know if you'd like me to contribute, Chairman.
Okie dokie. Carl, did you have an epiphany moment?
Yeah, I'll just I read the question, so I thought about it. Two books that I read that were transformational, had nothing to do with financial planning. Atomic Habits, which I probably mentioned as much as you boys mentioned Nick Murray, the book by James Clear. And also, when I was setting up my firm, I read a book called The Real Deal by James Caan, who was the Dragon's Den guy, who was into recruitment and that kind of stuff. And in terms of building a business from the ground up and then kind of how to scale and, blah, 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 I thought it was really good. So they're 2 books I would recommend. And my kind of eureka moment was Stephen Brown was a pal of mine, and Stephen was had found this Voyant software, and he came down to my office. I think this was 2012, and he showed me this software, and I went, holy God, that's unbelievable. There's nothing like this. Bear in mind, like literally everybody in Ireland were product sellers at that stage. And Stephen said, I'm going to bring this to Ireland and I'm going to sell it. Hilarious. And they'll also see that I was deeply uncomfortable with the content of some of today's podcast, owing to the Irish versus UK cultural differences. Anyway, Browner said he was going to bring this software to Ireland, and I thought, it looks fantastic, but there's no chance that this will work. Anyway, Browner's VP of Voyant, the world, I think, at this stage, right? He's gone on to be a huge success, so well done to him.
But it was around then. Does he?
Yeah, I was going to say, he'd love that mention. He'd love that little mention.
He's a great guy. He's an absolutely great guy. But it was after that meeting, he told me, this is standard stuff, Carl, in America. And, it's just beginning to become big in the UK. And it was at that moment I started to do a load of research. So that was really the moment for me. So thank you, Stephen Brown.
Is it worth briefly mentioning, since you did that the Irish drop, just there, Nick, about the new world record of beer consumption. What is it you posted, Carl, or you shared with us?
So the Ireland-Scotland match in the Rugby World Cup,
which we were all at.
Yeah, there was 137,000 pints served at that match, which beat the previous record by something like 50,000. But my point was, I only remembered the one that I delicately tucked under my seat to watch during the first half, and Andrew Hart kicked over into my shoe. I didn't mind that he kicked it into my shoe. I minded that he spilt it. He of course does have a lot of excuses. Anyway,
well, to be fair, it wasn't my fault. It was that idiot behind me with his jacket. But we did the right thing. We all tipped our pints accordingly, so we all had the same amount after. So we shared the spoils.
You took some of Alan or some of Nick's pint and poured it into mine, poured in some of your own, and Scotland were 14-0 down at the time, and you dared touch Alan's because he was in a bit of a mood.
He was on the ball.
I wasn't talking to anyone at the time.
He was on the board. Okay, very good.
Right.
Thank you for asking what my epiphany moment was, chaps. I'll reiterate. Alan's mentioned it. It was, I do have a clear eureka moment, and it was when I saw Paul Armisen talking about the bucket and truth software, and this was 2007 ish, I guess. And I thought, bloody hell, this is the word. This is the word. And everything I did off that cascaded off of that. Books to read. I've mentioned it before, Alan. I know you love it as well. It's not a finance one, but I would say just really read Dale Carnegie's book. It came out in 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And a more recent kind of update on that book is Ask by Dan Solin, which is really good. Solin, Dan Solin. Really, really good book, just about the power of questions, and to become interesting, become interested. If you give people a damn good listening to, they will love you, generally. We're just all itching to talk. As is Mr. Hart with your digit raise, sir.
Yeah, final thing on the Paul Armisen thing. Yeah, I went to see his truth presentation. I think I paid 59 quid or whatever it was in 2008 in St Albans. I wasn't impressed. I was just thinking, surely everyone's doing this. Aren't financial advisors, using software to show people what's the reason behind their money? Yeah, the whole room was impressed. I was like, really, is this the standard we're at? I thought it was
Andy, the ultra crepidarian Andy. He knows about everything, Andy. Can't be told anything. His name is Andrew Hart. Andrew Hart!
I thought Paul did a great presentation, but what I meant, I wasn't impressed with the standard of financial advisors or financial advice in the UK.
Yeah,
there was no financial planning.
You weren't one. Is the important thing. You thought, well, surely everyone's doing this.
Yeah, I thought surely everyone's
that's actually part
doing
of Paul's,
proper financial
that's exactly
advice.
what Paul would say in that presentation. When he spoke to a client,
yeah,
all the clients would say,
agreed.
well, surely everyone does this. And he
Yeah,
says,
that's
no,
exactly what I thought. I thought
this day, however many years later, it's still the minority of people and companies who deliver what we call full-fat financial planning. It remains the minority a decade plus later, which is crazy. But well done, Andy, for saying it was a waste of time. You thought it was rubbish.
No, it wasn't a waste of time. I wasn't pleased with the standard of financial advice that I was entering into, and I've tried to loosely fix it as time goes on.
I might play the drop again, actually. Okay, we're at 81 minutes in. Let's go on to Culture Corner, for the love of God. Right, I'm not allowed to read these out, so you can look at your notes and start talking.
Carl, would you? Go on, Carl.
You're lovely. I like it, Nick. So I put in a Google Talks with JL Collins, didn't I? Yeah, that's what I did. I would much prefer if you read them out, Nick, because it reminds me
I know.
what I actually put in. Yeah, it's a really good video, YouTube video. I think it's 50 minutes. He touches on. I sometimes wonder where I get a lot of the phrases. I don't know if he got them from somebody else, but I use a lot of the phrases that he uses. He's not very friendly, or he's not a big fan of financial advisors. So you got to listen through that as well. And I think that you should listen to that, and formulate your views as to why you, as a financial planner, add value. Really, really good stuff. Really good guy. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Great stuff.
Alan, over to you, mate. Your Culture Corner point.
Yeah, just before I do that, I think it's important that, because the other guy who's sort of non-advisor but writes a lot of books about financial planning and investing and so on, is a guy that we've heard of called Ramit Sethi, who had his own Netflix series and so on. He just published, again, on whatever social media channels, I think I saw on Twitter, that all the data about why paying fees to an advisor is awful and will take you. If you do the compounding effect of a 1% model over 30 years or something, that adds up. And so he was absolutely slating it. All I would say to anyone, we know the answers. I think we've talked about it loosely at some level in the past. But advisors need to be well versed with the response to that, which we all agree with. If you're hiring somebody just to tell you what funds to invest in, you're right, it's probably a waste of money. If you're hiring someone to do the work that firms like us do, and the good people listening to this do, it's worth 10 times the fee you pay. And that's what's lost in the message. But people like this are pretty popular, and they're getting increasingly popular. When you get a whole series on Netflix, what I'm saying is be prepared, because a prospective client will say to you, oh, just watching this program last night, or just watched the JL Collins video that Carl recommended. So have your research done, have your response to that, listen to their question thoughtfully, reflect on it and say, I agree with him for this type of advisor. Fortunately, we're not that type of advisor, and this is why it's worth engaging with us. I just thought I'd reflect that back. Now,
good points. And sorry, as someone who regularly pours scorn on the dying legacy media, doesn't mean I don't read it, because I do look at it because I need to know what my clients are consuming, so I can be on the front foot when they come to me with the latest stupid idea by some bonehead journalist. Right, Mr. Smith, I'm going to do it. Sylvester Stallone on Netflix. Get to it.
I think we all need to be inspired on a regular basis. I certainly do. There's enough doom and gloom around. If you subscribe to the mainstream media or any type of media, there's lots of negativity. I absolutely love Sly Stallone. I've been a sort of fan of his from the early, the very first Rocky movie and so many of his other films. And I knew something of the Sylvester Stallone story, but he himself unpacks his whole kind of life story on this Netflix. And it's an hour and a half. It's not a long sort of series or anything. And in particular, if anyone knows about Sly Stallone, as he got started, really tough upbringing in Hell's Kitchen in New York. And his parents were very kind of absent. And it's a tough life. And he wanted to, and by his own admission, he's not the best looking. He's not the most handsome. He's got this kind of strange Brooklyn type, whatever it is, New York accent. He wasn't the archetypal movie star. But he got into writing early on. And he wrote the screenplay, he wrote the script for Rocky, this very unlikely situation of a kind of a white boxer coming up from the sort of back streets and becoming world champion heavyweight boxer. And he was absolutely skint. He had no money whatsoever. And his work ethic was just freaking relentless. He would not say no, wouldn't take no for an answer. And he would knock on every door, any remote person that could help him. And he was shopping this script around. And eventually, everyone's saying, all these agents were saying, not interested. And he started to get some interest in it. And eventually, the price was bid up and up and up. Eventually, bear in mind, someone who's got no money whatsoever. He's in debt left, right, and center, barely surviving. And he gets offered $265,000 for the script on the premise that he can't be in it. It's $250,000 not to be in the movie, and he turns it down. Because he says, I have to be in it. It's my story. I need to be part of it, even though I've got no money at all. And it's just fabulous, just the relentless desire. And I was relating it back to previous conversations we've had in this podcast. People saying, I can't start up my own I hate where I am, but I don't want to start my own IFA business because I might have to, live a tough time for a year or two. I might have to cut back my expenditure for a year or two. Just watch Sylvester Stallone tell his own personal journey. He's now in his mid-70s.
We don't have to know. You've just told us all about it.
No, I just told you the beginning of it. I told you the beginning, which is a well-documented story, but Carl, by people who pay attention to these sort of things. Maybe you haven't seen it. But there is the rest.
Thanks for ruining the punchline of the whole documentary.
It's the first 5 minutes of the documentary.
Okay, well, I'm going to watch it. It sounds interesting.
The punchline is far more interesting down the line. That's just the opening story. Thank you.
Okay, great. Right, so Joe Rogan
so over
podcast.
to you, Nick.
Over to me. Do you want to tell me what I'm going to talk about? Go on, you do it. What am I talking about, Andy?
It's in front of you. Read the freaking notes.
Oh, yeah, so it is. Thank you. Lucky you're here. So Joe Rogan on his recent podcast had Elon Musk on, and it's just a really good listen. And if you can watch the video of it, that's fun as well. Just engaging. And for all his faults, Carl, and I have got the audiobook to listen to, his biography. He's an engaging character, Elon Musk, and he doesn't take himself too seriously, which, given his position in the world and his wealth and everything, is quite refreshing. And I never had a hankering for double pineapple and double anchovy pizza, but if you listen to the podcast or watch the video, you will do. My second culture corner, and I put a link to the video.
Nick, you said that's on Daily Motion. It's on Spotify. It's on Spotify.
No, the video. The
video's on Spotify.
Okay, fine, whatever. That's a source for it if you want to watch it.
Yeah. He's falling apart, dear listeners.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, a great book, and it's perennially on Kindle at 99p. So I would just suggest invest 99p. If you don't like it, you've wasted £1. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Mr. Hart, you're living the dream, Andy. PowerPoint course. Christ on a bike.
Yeah, okay. A couple of tips here. So I've recently subscribed to Chat GPT Plus. they've got this sort of subscription service, $20 a month. Just subscribe to it. You can use it for so many different things. Again, we've spoken about it on the podcast before, but yeah, the Plus version is got a few more bells and whistles. My sort of important culture corner is, it sounds very dull, a PowerPoint course. So I've been down a bit of a PowerPoint rabbit hole recently. I'm really trying to up my slide game. So for Hum today, my slides are going to be world class. And I've learned a load from this guy called Jacob, who's like a random online PowerPoint teacher. Anyway, he's got a great course. It's $49. It's Jacob PPT, which is the sort of file code for PowerPoint. So Jacob PPT let me just check if it's com. It is .com. There's a link in the show notes. If you want to up your PowerPoint game, subscribe to it.
We've got to unmute.
And I know a few of you will check this out. It is freaking epic.
I wonder if IKEA have done that for their... No, that's just a different thing. Okay, very good stuff. Are we done with the Culture Corner?
Yes.
I think we are, aren't we? I think we're pretty much done for an episode. What's that? Jesus, 90 minutes. 90 minutes. Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up now. As ever, if you want to leave a 6 out of 5 star review on iTunes, that would be great. Please do subscribe to our podcast as well. That way it'll pop into your phone as if by magic in the early hours of every other Thursday morning. We have a YouTube channel. We're now nearly 500 people on that. So we're going to get to 1,000 people, and then we will stop blitzing you with terrible adverts that have no context and interrupt the flow. I think that aside, that is pretty much it for the show. Hum, we look forward to seeing you there. That'll be a good catch-up. Loads of Trappists there. Good luck with that, Andy, on Thursday. I know it's going to be brilliant. It always is.
Thank you.
Until the next time, Trappists, adios, and take care out there, folks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you later. Absolute sham.